But Dickinson was buried on his father-in-law's farm, Joseph Irwin. Well, his farm is now a subdivision. The state of Tennessee went looking for Dickinson's body. It took him a couple of years, but they found it. It's right here in this guy's front yard behind that fire hydrant.
The night's young, and it's just begun. As she puts her hand in mine, we wanna chase the night, wanna dance to the light, pull the stars from the sky, just two hearts running wild. Never sleep, never stop, as we shout from the top. We're gonna be two hearts running wild.
So that's the first slide. So my first book I ever did was Ghost of Gallatin, Tennessee. And a follow-up, Ghost of Gallatin 2. So there's a place on the Gallatin Square, if you guys are familiar, it's called the Trousdale Place. It's built in 1813. It was a home of Governor William Trousdale. Before that, it was built for a congressman, John Bronham. So all kinds of weird, wild stuff take place in this house there on the square. So upstairs, you see this room here. They call it Mary's room. Mary was Governor Trousdale's granddaughter. She passed away when she was 18. Just finishing school, came back home, and she passed away from the cholera. So you walk into this room here. You see how it's set up. Well, there's a camera right there on the fireplace. And you walk in. Well, there's video footage they have. I don't have it on the slideshow, but all kinds of weird things happen. Like they can catch orbs moving left to right, right to left, never falling like dust should. That's a good picture of Mary before she passed away. So I do haunted tours in Gallatin, and you can see one night the lights on in Mary's room. So I tell everybody on the tour, take pictures, and you always want to point at Mary's window. Well, one night a guy walked to the front of the house, he's in the room, took a picture, and there's Mary's window, and the light is on. Well, as I was talking, the light went off. So I sent that picture to the director and said, "Hey, look at this, Mary's light. It's on, but it turned itself off." She's like, "Honey, that's impossible. If you look at this, there's no outlet for that plug to be plugged in. The plug is laying flat on the floor, but yet the light was on in the window." So we get all kinds of wild pictures in Mary's room. You can see right here, that's like just zoomed in. You can see the girl in the window there at Mary's room. It's one of the weirdest, wildest, probably one of the best pieces of evidence. Or I mean, it could be just be where the light's catching the curtains. I don't really know, but it's really wild showing the girl where the girl died in that room. And here's another one that's kind of wild. I'm doing the ghost tour that night, and this kid said, "Someone's above you. It's up there in the window. It's watching us." I said, "Oh, well, take a picture and send it over to me." So he did. So you see there's like a silhouette in that window there. Something dark is in that window. Well, that shouldn't be there. There's a staircase there, and whatever's in that window will be 8 or 9 foot tall. So at the end of the night, I sent a picture to the director. "Hey, I want you to know that I captured this in the window." She wasn't really concerned about the shadow in the window above me. She will know who was over here holding the curtains in the far bedroom in Mary's room. So you can see there's like, I'll show you the slide. There's a chair right there. But who is over here holding the curtain? That's what she wanted to know. So all kinds of weird, wild stuff in Mary's room. My next book I wrote was about Murfreesboro, Tennessee. In Murfreesboro, yes ma'am?
Why do you think that area is so haunted?
In Gallatin, well, Gallatin was occupied during the Civil War. All 3 churches on Main Street were hospitals. They were hanging folks behind the courthouse. There's just a lot of weird, wild energy. Fire codes are a big thing, especially in Tennessee. Before 1851, there's no fire codes in Middle Tennessee. That's when Davidson County implemented fire codes. Before that, every building's made of wood on these town squares. So all these buildings just go up in smoke, and they're fighting with literal bucket brigades from the creek or from the river. Once Nashville implemented the codes, it wasn't until a few decades later, it was Rutherford County, Sumner County, and outlying counties picked them up. So, but even after that, all these buildings on the square are taking time bombs. All these fires, you hear about the fires in New Orleans, Chicago, Gallatin, Tennessee, Murfreesboro, all these town squares all went up in flames. In Gallatin, it was 3 times during Reconstruction, North Water burned to the ground. So a lot of these ghost stories, these small towns come from fires and poor fire codes. But Murfreesboro is the same way, a lot of fires in Murfreesboro. And something wild, there's one building they talk about Uncle Lou. There's like this creepy man they see in the house. So after this book came out, someone sent me a picture a year or two later. They took a picture on a ghost tour and took a picture. I'll back up. So it says Uncle Lou is watching you. The insurance agent, he bought the building, and they found that picture in the basement where a previous tenant had it. It was kind of creepy. He put it back up. A year later, someone's taking a ghost tour of Murfreesboro, and in the building next to it, they get this picture of a creepy man in the window. The guy said to me, he said, "You wrote the book, right?" I said, "Yeah, well, look at this." I don't know. It's pretty weird. There's a better shot of it. So Franklin, Tennessee, if you guys know about the Civil War, Battle of Franklin was one of the biggest, bloodiest battles in the Civil War. You had 20,000 entrenched Union soldiers, and you had 20,000 Confederates coming down Winstead Hill. It's a big, bloody battle. So as I'm working on this book, I talked to everybody on the square there. And you guys are familiar with Franklin, Tennessee, the white building, the Starbucks on the corner. So the Starbucks is telling me, oh, there's a bugler in our basement. The eye doctor in the room next, I gotta back up. So after the Battle of Franklin, every building on the square became a hospital. So now people see things in this building. So the Starbucks in the corner said, hey, we saw a bugler in our basement. The eye doctor in the middle said we saw a drummer boy in our basement. The guy over on the other side of the mattress store said, well, I saw something down there, I'm not sure what it is. So one night, a buddy of mine, he's a paranormal investigator, has all this equipment, thousands of dollars of electronics. We're down there in the basement of this white building in the eye doctors, which is right next door to Starbucks. So we're down there, we're setting up, we get nothing. So I got my phone and I play the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which, was like the federal fight song. Everything goes nuts. The lights are going off, the beeps and whistles. So we move upstairs and go to the observation room where someone has heard someone whispering in their ears. Same thing, we're getting nothing. Well, I plug my phone, Battle Hymn of the Republic, it goes nuts. So finally, Wendy, the lady who works there, she said, well, what's your name? And it said Drake. And the box he uses is called a geoport. It scans radio waves, not sure how it works, but we heard Drake as clear as day. Well, she said, did you say Drake? And it said, yes. So, that's no. She said Drake. She said, did you say Blake or Drake? She said Drake. And she said, did you say Drake? Yes. So 3 confirmations of Drake. So I go to the archives, I start researching. I find out Thomas Jefferson Drake was a drummer, the 10th of Ohio, who died in the Battle of Franklin. Now I can't say for sure he died in that building that preceded the white building, but it's really wild. The drummer who was playing the Battle of the Republic responded to the stuff we're doing. Really, really wild. If you go and find a grave, you'll see his picture and you'll see the drum that was left behind in Franklin when he passed away. So weird things happen when we start writing ghost stories. Everybody wants to come tell you their ghost story. So growing up in Nashville, we had a theme park called Opryland. You guys ever go? No, it was a place to be when I was a kid. Well, anyway, so in the 1300s, the land was the Indian village there by the Cumberland River. Well, the McGavick family, a prominent family who had 2 mayors in their family of Nashville, they bought the land, they started digging up roads, started digging up Indian remains. Well, the Two Rivers Mansion is what is there today. Well, when Miss Louisa McGavick, the last heiress of the McGavick family, passed away in the 70s, she had no children. So she left the house, she left all the land there by the Cumberland River to her church. She wanted to use for an orphanage or a hospital. Her body wasn't cold in the grave, they sold it to build the theme park. So they get this theme park up and running, and they see a lady walking around at night. I talked to staff members where they'd be cleaning up, and this woman would kind of walk up to them, and they would disappear. They see her in the theme park, and if you look, that's me when I was 5 years old. That's me and my sister when I was about 6 and 7. But yeah, they see her in the hotel, they see her at the Opry House. I worked in the hotel back in the 90s, and that was kind of like a thing. The old lady, or you saw Miss McGavick, and she kind of stays, if you're familiar with the Opryland Hotel, she stays in the older location. She doesn't go to the sound waves or to the other parts. But yeah, it's a thing over there at Opryland. And after the book came out, if you look on Facebook, there's an Opryland Facebook page. There was a lady who took her kids to the movie theater in Opry Mills, so they tore the park down to build the mall. So in the mall, there's a theater. A lady took her children to see a movie. Well, she takes a selfie, and behind them, there's a lady in black. Yeah, it's wild, but it's on that Facebook Opryland page. So downtown Nashville, all kinds of stories in Nashville. It's an old river town, just crazy, crazy stuff. So one of my favorite stories is the Capitol, the state capitol there in the heart of downtown. So when they built this building, built it back in the 1830s, there's no building codes in 1830, right? Well, if you look in between the columns here, you see the columns on the second level? The portico is what they call it. But those rails were not there. So I found accounts in old newspapers where children would climb up there and they would fall, they'd break their legs, some would crack their skulls and die. Well, in the 1890s, they had started having conventions there, and these politicians would be in there, doing their business. Back then, there's no electricity. Inside, you have candles, oil lamps, but outside, there's no street lights, so it's very dark. These politicians go outside smoking their cigars, walk a few feet, fall off. A couple of them died, broke their necks. That's when they decided to put up the rails. Another thing about the Capitol, James K. Polk, our 11th president, after Polk literally left the White House, moved to Nashville, and died of cholera. So he was buried in the front yard of his home, but once he passed away, all his cousins, uncles, and family members, they wanted a piece of his estate. So the state of Tennessee got involved, they sold his property, and they dug up Polk's grave, and they moved him to the Capitol. This is what, he was really buried in this house right here. It's about a block and a half away from the Capitol. You can see that was his gravesite. They dug him up, and they moved him to the Capitol. And they say that you can sometimes see his widow there crying. It's kind of like the folk tale or whatever, urban legend in Nashville. But where that house was, they tore it down to build this apartment complex. Today, they built a library, but it's now a business. I think it's an architecture firm. But I found accounts in old newspapers where people who worked there years ago would hear voices at night, like a man and a woman talking. So they say it's President Polk and his wife, Sarah, in that building there. So South Nashville is kind of where I grew up. I'm from Nashville. I was born and raised in Antioch, really. So this right here is one of the wildest places, Lindsley Hall. In the Civil War, it was a hospital. A lot of men came there to be treated. A lot of them died. But one of the wildest, weirdest stories I got is Knox Martin. And I'll kind of talk about this tomorrow, also my Galvanism panel. So Knox Martin, he was a former slave in Alabama. After the war, moved to Nashville to find work. Well, before he found a job, he moved in with a lady he called Aunt Mary. Aunt Mary was his mother's best friend. She was from Haiti. She was a practicing voodoo priestess. Well, he takes a job in West Nashville on a plantation, and there's a disagreement about his wages, how much the landowner owes him. So Knox goes to Aunt Mary's, telling her all about it, and she's like, "Oh, honey, he's dark. He wants to kill you." But I don't know, Aunt Mary. She gets in his head and fills him with this stuff. So he leaves that night and goes to the plantation. He confronts the farmer. "Hey, where's my money you owe me? Come back tomorrow." No, he kicks a wagon there on the front porch, picks up the spoke, and he bludgeons the farmer and his wife. So he goes on the run. They catch him eventually. A lynch mob is formed to go hang him, some vigilante justice. But fortunately, the sheriff gets him. They take him to Gallows and they hold him away from Nashville where he's safe. They get him his day in court. He's found guilty of murder. Well, as he's found guilty of murder, as he's awaiting his date on the gallows, a doctor comes to him. So once Mary Shelley published Frankenstein, all these doctors all over America thought, "Oh, I can read my body. It's no problem." So this doctor gave Knox some silver and said, "Hey, I want your body once the execution's done." Okay, what's he got to lose? So the day they hanged him, they took him to a field out in South Nashville where Trevecca is. It's a private college there on Oak Square Road. So there's a big hill, and thousands of people gathered. Back then, execution was like a carnival. They would sell roasted corn, they sell apples. It was an event. So they performed their duty on the gallows. Knox was hanged. After it's over, they take his body back to a shed behind the gallows. Well, there's a carnival going on. Hundreds of people descend upon this little shed, start pulling the paneling off the roof, or off the wall. They climb to the top, pull open the roof, watching what's going to happen. So to make a galvanized battery, you get to have these two glass cylinders, you have chemicals, a salt bridge. Once it's activated, you have some wires you stick in there, they put it on his spine, and his spine and his temple. So Knox, once the battery's going, he shoots off the table, his eyes open, his mouth moves, his arms start flailing around. Well, eventually the battery dies and he kind of just falls back. Well, the doctors, his body's still warm, they throw him in a coffin, put him in a wagon, and rush him back to this medical college right here. So once they get him inside, they bolt the doors, no one can come in. Well, a few days later, the editor of the Tennessean gets a letter. Is it true Knox Martin is still alive? I just saw him walking to Alabama. There's a letter that comes in from West Nashville. Someone sends in a tintype photograph of Knox taken in jail. The piece of rope that said that was used to hang him. The doctors are getting letters. Did you really revive this man? I just saw him walking through Lafayette. So it's like, I'm 99.9% sure this guy was dead and gone. But for like 2 months, Nashville was convinced Knox Martin was alive because the Tennessee was printing these letters on the front page every day. It's nuts. So Traveler's Rest is in South Nashville. I lived behind there for 10 years. So in the 50s, John Overton, he was the Superior Court Justice in Nashville, or Tennessee, and he lived in Nashville. He's Andrew Jackson's best friend. When he bought this land, he dug up 3 Indian graves to build his house. This house right here, he called it Golgotha, which means house of the skull. He later got married. His wife's like, hey, let's call it Traveler's Rest. A little more user-friendly, I suppose. But in the 50s, my great-grandparents bought 2 acres from Overton descendants, and they moved into the house, and they lived there for a while. In 97, my great-grandfather passed away. My great-grandmother was put in a home in 05. My uncle called me and said, hey, would you mind moving in? The insurance won't cover the house if it's empty. Sure, why not? I moved in my first night in the house. A trash can moved 8 feet in the middle of the night into the kitchen. I would come home from work in the afternoons, and all 3 TVs in the house would be on, in 2 bedrooms and the den. I had a light in the den. I would turn it off every night in the morning. It would be on. I only had to unplug it and stick it in the garage. The weirdest account was from a friend of mine who came over to change clothes. They were going to work. They walked into my bedroom and saw a lady standing in the corner in a white dress. I never saw her, but a lot of weird things happened, so I wasn't shocked. Well, one day I hopped the fence and walked over to the historic mansion, and I said, hey, look, I live right over here, and things are happening all the time. There are ghost stories here. Oh, no, sir, I can assure you there are no ghost stories here. Okay. No, we talk about the Overton family, the Native Americans, no such thing as ghosts. Whatever. So I go to leave, and this lady gets out of her car, she pulls up, she's wearing the period attire to volunteer. I said, ma'am, I live right over here, where things are happening. This place haunted. Oh, honey, there's so many ghost stories, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. Okay, I get it. So West Nashville, I told you I got 4 books on Nashville. It's not really a ghost story, it's really, really wild. So Andrew Jackson, in 1806, he is the leader of the Tennessee militia. He's a former Superior Court Justice, very well-respected man around Nashville. He's not quite Old Hickory yet because he hadn't gone off to New Orleans, but he's coming up, very prominent Nashvilleian. Well, what Nashvilleians did with a lot of money, they would race their horses. There are 3 horse tracks in Middle Tennessee. Before Louisville was a thing, you came to Nashville to race horses. So General Jackson is racing horses at this place, Clover Bottom, and he makes a bet with a guy named Joseph Irwin, a friend of his. So Jackson's horse was Truxton, Irwin's was Plowboy. Well, they make a bet, they're going to meet the next week, winner take all. So before they leave, Irwin said, you know what, if you don't show up next week, I want an extra $800. Jackson said, deal, they shake hands. The next week, Irwin's horse pulls up lame, something's wrong with his hoof. So Irwin comes back to the racetrack. Hey, buddy, good to see you, Andrew Jackson. He knows what's about to happen. So Jackson's like, okay, well, your horse ain't here, where's my money? Well, have you heard the term breaking the bank? In 1806, $800 would break the bank. That's really like $300,000 in our money. So Irwin agreed to pay him promissory notes and a payment plan. Well, word gets around Nashville that he's no good on his money. So he confronts Jackson in a bar. His hotshot son-in-law, Charles Dickinson, kind of gets involved. They make peace. Well, they go to the horse track the next week. He starts talking about Andrew Jackson's wife. So Jackson's wife is married to a man in Kentucky. It's a long story. She technically was still married to him because the courts didn't oversee it, because Kentucky went from a territory to a state, and paperwork got lost. So this bigamy stuff's following Jackson. The young man starts popping off to General Jackson. They make plans to go to the Red River, the Kentucky line. The founder of Nashville, James Robertson, goes to Jackson, you can't do this in Nashville. I forbid you. So he agrees to go to Kentucky, the Red River. So they walk their paces, and as Jackson, on the ride up there in the carriage ride, he finds out that Dickinson, everybody in Nashville has bet on Charles Dickinson to win this duel. Dickinson has won, in some accounts say he's 13-0. He had a bunch of duels in Maryland, he's never been shot at. He's just so quick on the draw. So Jackson devises this scheme with his buddy Thomas Overton, the brother of John Overton, Traveler's Rest. He's going to wear his coat. Jackson's a tall, lanky man. Thomas is a short, stout guy, and he's going to miss. Coach won't throw him off. So Walker faces 3-2-1. Dickinson fires. Hits Jackson. He doesn't sell it. He wants this man's blood. So shoots him. Dickinson, he's undefeated. He's like, did I miss? What's going on? And his second, you had to have have an assistant there to help you in case you got dropped and you go find a doctor. Get back on your spot. He gets a shot. So Dickinson gets on the spot. He's fidgeting, can't sit still, and Jackson's just sizing him up. He's just having a good old time. Click. The gun jams. It misfires. So Dickinson in his second phase is settled. Are we done? What's going on here? I don't know. Jackson just banging his gun. Bang. It drops it. So Jackson won the duel, killed the guy. It's kind of sketchy. Jackson caught a lot of heat for that. Actually, when he came back to Nashville, the man had 2 young small children. But Dickinson was buried on his father-in-law's farm, Joseph Irwin. Well, his farm is now a subdivision. The state of Tennessee was looking for Dickinson's body. It took him a couple of years, but they found it. It's right here in this guy's front yard behind that fire hydrant. So, yeah, it's really wild. So, Brentwood, Tennessee, it's a small little farming town. A lot of stuff during the Civil War with the forest and some cavalry raids. But the Midway Mansion's kind of neat. The story goes that there was a Union soldier. The girls who lived here, they were actually cousins with Two Rivers, the McGavin company I mentioned earlier. Well, a Union soldier came to them. It's like, hey, I'm dying. Please just let me, take care of me. So they begrudgingly agreed to do it. They said, look, but if you die, you can't be buried here. They said, okay, well, here, write a letter to my parents. I'll keep my body. They never did. Well, he's buried in their family cemetery, and they say that sometimes you can see him walking through the windows. People working the building say that there's like a man in blue that walks through the building at night. So Hendersonville, this was a fun one. This house here, right here, was built in 1820. It's called Springhaven. That's the original cabin built in 1806. So it actually belonged to Jackson's doctor. So we did a paranormal investigation here one night, and the story goes, the owner told me they had a lady came rent this room. And she woke up one night and saw an old man sitting right by the bed right there. So we do our investigation, and we're getting all kinds of stuff. And I asked as clear as day, who's the President of the United States? And we heard Lincoln from this box. So all kinds of weird things go on in this house. They say that you can smell smoke in this one room, this kitchen. Right here, there's a story. The lady who owned the house, she had she's like an old 80-year-old widow. She had, limited means, limited capacity. But she had a piano she wanted moved. So she hired these 2 guys from Nashville to come move the piano for her. She gets there, they get there, and she said, hey, look, hardwood floors, please don't scuff them. And be very careful. She goes in the kitchen, makes something to drink. Boys, I told you to be careful about hardwood floors. Get back in your truck. Me and Big John's gonna get this. Big John, get in the truck. Yes, ma'am. The guys go sit in the truck. A few minutes later, boom, piano's in the truck. They go back inside. Ma'am, how'd you do that? I told you, boys, me and Big John take care of this. And that's a story. Big John, I guess he's a former slave on the site. He's very protective of the house, and he always took care of Miss Britton, who was the widow there. So Chattanooga, this is a fun one. You may ever stayed at the Reed House in Chattanooga? All right, so the Reed House, it was preceded by the Crutchfield House, which is a Civil War hospital. So the Reed House was built, I think, in the 30s. It's beautiful inside. So the story goes, room 311, there's a lady named Annalisa Netherland. She was staying there with her husband, and they had an argument. Something happened, and she wound up dead the next morning. So they give tours of this room. They don't let you rent this room. In October, they opened it up for 1 month. It's $666 for one night, or $9.99 for Halloween night. Is what we're renting. But men have been attacked, men have been scratched, men have been pushed. I talked to a number of bellhops who told me they've seen men run out of that room and out of the building and don't come back. A guy sent me this picture he took his first week there. He's a maintenance man. He took it in that room, and you can see there's a lady kind of turned to the side. It's a pretty good picture. It's like a lady in the early 20th century, which is the time frame of the story. So yeah. So Knoxville, there's some ghost stories here, and this is more of a grave robbing thing. I get tickled with this. So the Toggs family, there was Charles Toggs died in 1913. Well, they have the ceremony, and they go back the next day to do something, and they find the grave has been disturbed. Well, when his grave was disturbed, it was his father's. The grave robbers went to go get the body and sell the body to college. The skeleton of the father who died 20 years earlier had been dug up. The grave robbers got the wrong grave. Yeah, it's nuts. But the Baker's Peters house is probably one of the coolest places in Knoxville. It's built in 1830. Dr. James Baker, he's a prominent doctor in town. So it's now an Irish pub. There's a dentist office in there as well. So the story goes, during the Civil War, I told you guys Knoxville was occupied. Some Civil Wars, some Union soldiers came in there, and Dr. Baker had been tending to rebel soldiers. Well, they went to arrest him, and he locked himself in a room and started firing. Well, they killed him. Well, his son Abner is a Confederate soldier. He comes back a few months later looking for revenge. And he winds up hanging the postmaster, who is allegedly one of the soldiers who shot his father. But all kinds of wild things happen in this building. I had a step member told me she was grabbed by the ankle. They hear voices at night. A lady told me a register jumped off the shelf and almost hit her. But it's a cool place to eat. But I actually have a story or a book coming out later in October about a voodoo doctor in Knoxville. So in 1940, there was a guy named Obie Roddy. He was a voodoo doctor who lived off of North Central, an apartment complex on the second floor. On the third floor, the Jeffersons lived. Alex Jefferson was a piano teacher. And all during the day, he had these children coming over playing funky piano music. Well, the voodoo doctor was tending to his patients on the second floor. It's driving him nuts. So after a while, he's like, I can't stand it. He goes up the stairs, knocks on the door. Hey, please, I have patients downstairs. Knock this off. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother you. Well, a couple of days later, more kids come over playing the funky piano music. He goes upstairs and he leaves his powder by the door. So the next morning, this husband gets really sick. He has to go to the hospital. Well, he finally comes home. After that, he's getting more piano lessons once he gets better. Roddy goes up there and he goes to the door, knocks on the door. He's trying to make small talk with the wife, and the whole time his hands are behind his back like this. He's dropping powder on their kitchen floor. She sees him and comes unglued. He runs downstairs. She grabs a pistol and goes and shoots him in the doorway. So it's nuts about this story. But I wrote a book based on that. It's called X. It comes out in October. But Tennessee Tales, these are some fun stories, just small town ghost stories and legends. Spring Hill, Ripavilla, a little bit south of Nashville, there's a Civil War hospital. So the lady here, there's a lady here, and I took a tour. The tour guide was a friend of mine. It was me, him, and there was a lady and her daughter. She was a college student. She's 19, 20 years old, pretty little girl. We finished the tour, and I told Chuck, I said, that college girl, like her perfume was so strong but knocked me down. He said, Alan, that wasn't that college girl. Anytime a pretty lady comes to the house, the lady of the house makes her presence known with lavender. Anytime she feels intimidated, you smell lavender all through the house. She's trying to mark her territory, so to speak. So Tennessee Tales 2. I get some. Funny thing happens when I write ghost stories. Everybody tells their ghost stories. I have so much stuff. But Tennessee Tales 2 is just more small town ghost stories. And Spearfinger. You guys heard of Spearfinger? Cherokee legend. Kind of like an East Tennessee thing. Well, according to the Cherokee folklore, back in the 1300s, you had the Shawnee, the Creek, the Cherokee, all kind of fighting over the same land. So Spearfinger was the Cherokee protector. So if she goes out in the woods and a Creek warrior stumbles upon her, he's not going to attack this little old lady. So what she does is she kind of unfurls her spear finger, her dagger on her finger, sticks him in the heart. And then you would drop to the ground, and then she'd come over and to chew up your liver. And once she ate your liver, she would take your shape and just go to your village, wash, rinse, and repeat, clean out the whole village. So yeah, it's a lot of fun stories like that. So yeah, I've got other books about witches and monsters and cryptids, and my booth's right back over there. If you guys want to come talk to me, share some ghost stories, grab a book. But yeah, thanks for coming out. I'm sorry we kind of got late start with technical difficulties, but it's hard to fit 40 books into a 30-minute presentation. That did the best I could. But thank you guys.
So Val, that was our friend Alan Sircy. What'd you think about his presentation?
Loved it. I love his books. You guys will have to check him out. We'll put a link down below so you guys can check out his website and check out his books, especially if you're into ghost stories and cryptids. He's got some amazing books. I think I have about 8 of them so far.
Yeah, for me, I listen to all his stories and then I go and research them, and I want to see this stuff for myself.
We're gonna be 2 hearts running wild.